Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Wednesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky, as Luka Dončić heads back to Slovenia. He's doing it with a big old chip on his shoulder, and that's a good thing for the Lakers. That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter where you get your podcasts. This one's always free, never going to be behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can hang out with over 36,000 subscribers to the channel, Andy, all of whom are still basking in the glow of a great weekend for the Lakers as Luka extends in Los Angeles. We'll talk a little about a couple more things that popped up in a great feature from Dan Woike on kind of recapping that whole week for Luka and where his head is at, where his team's head is at, what it meant for the Lakers and all that stuff. We'll talk about a rumor that was out there today that Kevin Love, the veteran and former teammate of LeBron James, is interested in finishing things in LA. Didn't get more specific than that, but only leaves really two options. So a couple things there. But first, I do want to let people know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. We asked the question. I thought this was interesting because, and obviously this was before I saw what Dan wrote, because you had talked, Andy, a couple times and referenced, the beginning of the Luka Dončić era when we did our show on Saturday on 710 ESPN, reacting to the extension and the press conference and all that kind of stuff. A couple times you called it the beginning of the Luka era. Obviously, technically started when they acquired him, but it's interesting if you read Dan's story at the Athletic. It appears that Team Dončić kind of thinks of it the same way as we were talking about last night, or for yesterday's show, as the kind of the real official beginning of his time with the Lakers.
Yeah, it's felt that way to me for a while. First off, just because the extension was really Luka making the first commitment. Not that he wasn't playing hard when he arrived at Lakers and trying to win or something like that, but this was the first real commitment he had made to them. Rob Pelinka pointed out, I believe, either in the statement that the Lakers released when Luka signed the extension or during the press conference, the Lakers committed to Luka first, just when they made the trade for him. But then this was Luka really committing to the organization. So in that sense, it felt like the era beginning because it was the official marking of a partnership, but also because Luka, by his own admission and just frankly the eye test, was not comfortable for the early parts of being a Laker, which makes sense because he was completely sucker punched by the trade in the first place and had very, very clearly imagined and I think desired the idea of being a Mav for life. And quite literally taking the metaphorical torch from Dirk Nowitzki. Dirk's final season coincided with Luka's rookie year, and just carrying that legacy of great players in Dallas Mavericks uniforms forward. That's what he had wrapped his head around. It took a while for him to wrap his head around the idea of that not being his career anymore and that he was going to be starting a different career with the Lakers. So in that sense, well, again, obviously, Luka has played basketball in a Laker uniform. It didn't feel as much to me like the Luka era as what happened upon the extension, in very large part because Luka was so clearly going out of his way to signal we are building up to something big, and the big thing was signing this extension. Like, this was an event by design.
So I'll read from Dan's piece. It was another moment that, talking about the concert and all that kind of stuff, kind of leads into this. Of course, the Lakers are taking Luka to a celebratory Backstreet Boys concert at the Sphere in Las Vegas. It was another moment that solidified that Dončić was right where he was supposed to be, with a new team in a new city with a new opportunity. He formalized all that Saturday, signing a 3-year contract extension with the Lakers the first day they were able to offer it to him. He signed that deal, presented to him in custom purple and black folders with his name and the Lakers logo in opposite corners, with a phrase his management team had chosen on a video screen behind him, the beginning. And so, you see that, and it's obviously, the beginning of the time with the Lakers, like the real beginning of the Luka Dončić era. But I also think it's the beginning of a new focus, it seems, for Luka to punish people around the league. To your point, his manager, Lara Beth Seager, said he's, quote, moved on in terms of carrying baggage around from his time in Dallas and the trade and all that kind of stuff. But she also said this. He signed. I'm sorry. She also talked about, I should say, the perspective that Luka has about kind of taking it to the rest of the league, about some of the disrespect that he's felt. Here's a quote I was looking for. He's only looking forward, and he's here. He wants to get the best players here. He wants to win, and I know he knows it starts with him, Seager said. And I think that's what he proved this offseason. Okay, everyone wants to say people think they know me, or that I'm not a leader, or that I'm this way, or I'm that way, or that I don't care. They think and say, they can think and say whatever they want. I'm going to show them who I am. That's Luka taking a chip, his manager putting the words in his mouth, but Luka taking the chip.
She's not putting any words in his mouth.
No, she's speaking, right. That she's reflecting his.
For those because this is new for Laker fans, like in terms of getting to know Team Luka, we've gotten very familiar with Team LeBron and Clutch was also Team Anthony Davis. You're going to be hearing the name Bill Duffy a lot because that's Luka's agent. And you're going to be hearing the name Lara Beth Seager a lot because she is his manager. I think if you were looking for a comp, if I had to guess, and I apologize to either person if I'm getting this wrong, but it feels like the relationship in some ways between LeBron and Maverick Carter, like in the way that it feels at times like Maverick guides sort of the big overall picture with LeBron's career, and Rich Paul handles the agent stuff. Again, I might be mistaken in the analogy.
No, but I mean, even if it's not the exact comp, it's that level of closeness. She's not speaking out of turn. She's speaking, on behalf of, I think is a better way of saying it. And so when she says those things, she's reflecting what Luka is thinking, and she's expressing Luka's thinking, because Luka is not a terribly chatty guy, in terms of the, this type of media story. And so I just think it's interesting. Like you see that Dončić taking this chip and putting it on his shoulder. Like, I am coming into this year, not just with the revenge bod, but really to show people, like, to prove doubters wrong. And what I find fascinating about this prospect, Andy, athletes are famous for inventing slights. Jordan used to make up stuff that people said or did, or players had said or did to him. And a lot of times it weren't even true. And then just use that to go out and annihilate people. Kevin Durant famously uses eggs on Twitter to get motivated and all that kind of stuff. Luka Dončić was legitimately disrespected by the Dallas Mavericks, not just in the way that they traded him. Okay, maybe good decision, bad decision, but to justify it, there was a lot of stuff that at the very least the Mavericks did zero to counteract, to disagree with, about kind of bad mouthing Luka and his training and his
Why would they counteract their own whisper campaign?
There are people who are saying that they're claiming they didn't put any of that out there. I do not believe that.
Okay. Yeah, that's hilarious.
But even then, you could still see there are a lot of, they certainly at best were not dispelling anything that was out there. Like, that is legitimately the kind of thing. If you're a professional athlete who happens to be as competitive as Luka Dončić is, that's not even like fabricated chip on shoulder stuff. That's the real deal. That's the actual stuff you can use to motivate, and you don't even have to make it up. And we can talk a little bit more about that after the break and what it means for the Lakers going forward. But like, this is part of what the Lakers are acquiring here. We'll do that next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Game Time. You've ever decided the last minute to head to a ball game with some friends or your family? Maybe it's game day and you just decide, I got to be in the stands, man. I got that itch. That's where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress, and you can use that money that you save on food or drinks, merch, whatever you want. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. The prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch. They've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game at, say, Dodger Stadium, where I know a lot of Laker fans spend their NBA offseason. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
So this from Antoine Willis just popped up on the chat board, Andy, for people watching live on YouTube. Do you think Luka can win multiple MVPs with other guys like Tatum, Edwards, and SGA in the league all around his age? It's an interesting question. We can talk this. We'll get back to the other stuff in a second. If you had to bet on how many MVPs Luka will win as a Laker, I have not thought about this at all. So, I mean, this is kind of like a live thought exercise. But let's say he plays here for 8 years. It takes him to 30-something, and then he retires or goes back and plays in Slovenia. But, like, how many MVPs do you think you get out of that? 8 years, 10 years, whatever it might be.
I mean, to some degree, this is going to be dependent on how good the team is around him.
Right, exactly. Oh, there's no question. It's to a large degree.
I say this not to hedge, but just because your team, for the most part, there are rare exceptions, but for the most part, your team has to be this high to ride the ride that is your best player getting MVP. Like, take, for example,
top three in your conference.
Yeah.
Generally.
Take, for example, 2006, Kobe, the year that in retrospect, he really should have won MVP that season, the year that Kobe put up 35 a game. I mean, he was exceptional even by Kobe standards that year, but his team was, I believe, a 6th seed. You're not going to win an MVP for the most part. Again, there are exceptions. When Russell Westbrook won MVP that year, when he averaged a triple-double, I think OKC was a 5 or a 6 seed. But for the most part, it's not going to happen. So there's some requisite work that Rob Pelinka has to do, or internal improvement has to take place in order to put Luka in that position. But that being said, I think 2 MVPs are on the table, like as a starting point. And I say this specifically because the way Antoine phrased the question of with guys like Jokic or SGA or Jason Tatum or whoever in the league, yes, but all the great players overcome, by definition, the other great players when they win MVP.
Yeah.
I mean, when LeBron or Kobe or KD, Nash, Durant, whoever, like, they have all won MVPs against really crowded elite company. That's part of the thing that happens when you win MVP. And Luke is considered a top 5 player, so he's going to be in that mix.
I think for sure. Yeah, I'd be surprised if he didn't win one. I'd be surprised, I think, looking back on it. I don't know when it'll be. I don't know which year. I don't know, but I do think, Luka will have a championship in LA. I do think, though, it's gotten harder. Like, I feel like you look around and, the dynasty teams, like repeating teams, like it's not easy to do that stuff anymore. We had a long stretch of NBA history where, like, it felt like, if you didn't repeat, you could come back. The Spurs seemed to win every other year. And then, the Lakers had 3, and then they had 2. And, they had another finals that they went to before that. It was, 3 finals in 3 years. And so you look at all these things that there was sort of these dynastic teams, and it feels harder to do that now than it did then, whether it's because, it's tougher to keep teams together because maybe the talent level of the league is going up a little bit. Guys don't need to be in the big destination cities to make it work, whatever it is. So, like, if he wins 2 MVPs and a title or 2, that's really good. Like, I feel like in this era of the NBA, that's a really impressive thing, and has the Lakers in contention most years. It's funny, like, Luka's never been like a runner-up for the MVP. He's always been first team MVP, but I think, or NBA, but I think the highest he's finished for MVP is like 3rd or 4th, right? I'll look it up, but it's really hard to win MVP. Like, really hard. So many things have to line up that are kind of out of your control as a basketball player.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult work. I mean, you will look back, and a guy like Kobe, for example, we talked about him earlier, like or Shaq, it will seem to a lot of people crazy that they only won one MVP in their career. I think Kevin Durant only has 1. Like, I think there will be times where people look back on that and say, like, that's crazy for Kevin Durant. But then you have to start thinking about who should have won, who won instead, and why would you take the trophy away from them or what? Like, this stuff is supposed to be hard.
Yeah.
And, we've never been MVP voters, but a lot of times this can become a narrative thing or most interesting story thing or whatever.
Again, I mean, where your team lands.
Yeah, there's a lot of different criteria that goes into winning MVP other than just who's the best player in the league, and frankly, that's a subjective thing anyway.
Luka, just to put a cap on this, like, as a framing thing, 2 years ago in Dallas, when Luka averaged 34, 9.2, 9.8, a steal and a half a block a game, shot 49% from the floor, 38% from 3-point range, and 79% from the free throw line, he finished 3rd. So, to your point, like, behind Jokic and SGA. So it's really hard. But I think if he wins 1 or 2 would be a really impressive accomplishment. And it also means the Lakers have had at least 2 really top flight seasons.
There are not that many players who've won multiple MVPs. And to your point, too, I think it used to be more of a relatively common thing to, be the player that has ownership over MVP. Yeah. I think that used to be more. I mean, other than, I guess, Jokic over the last 10 years, Steph has a few, but I think especially too, as it becomes harder for teams to, win multiple championships or 3 and 4 years, something like that. I think in turn, it's going to make it harder for different players to essentially hang on to that trophy for like a 5-year period. They win 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. And Jokic is doing historic stuff to make that happen on a very good team. So anyway, it was a good question, Antoine. Thank you very much for leaving that question up there. But I mean, part of to put those 2 things together, Andy, part of what is going to potentially get Luka there is vengeance. And that extra bit of motivation,
or Kevin Love.
Yeah, maybe. But that extra bit of motivation that comes with this type of career pivot. And It was. It was. I'm glad that Dan's story got into the idea of like him. The other thing that I think was sort of underrated about last year was needing time to get past it. Now he's not only past it, but it fuels him. And so, just again, it's another sign the Lakers are getting a better version of Luka, and one much closer, likely, to the guy who was so dominant a couple years ago in Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when Freddie Freeman got traded to the Dodgers or signed with the. I don't remember exactly if it was a trade or signed with them, but he had planned on being a Brave for life, and that was difficult for a while for him. And I remember there was a point where Clayton Kershaw, had to gently but firmly say, "Man, we get that this is a transition for you, and we understand why it's tough. We need the Freddie Freeman from Atlanta, man. Like we need you to get past this." And he did.
And then they took him to a Backstreet Boys concert, and it was fine after that.
I'm just saying this stuff can be tough. But I think Luka, it seems like Luka is truly moved past it all. And I think it's going to be a really, really good season for him.
Weird little thing that popped up on Tuesday that Kevin Love wants to finish in Los Angeles. That's as specific as it got, this little internet nugget. But is LA the Lakers? Is that a decent spot for Kevin Love? We'll get to it next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by Open Phone. If you're running a business, you know that every missed call, that is money left on the table. Like, think about the last time you had some type of service emergency and the first person or company that you called didn't answer. You didn't sit around waiting. You called someone else. So that's why you need Open Phone, the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications, all through an app on your phone or computer. And you don't have to carry 2 phones. Great feature. With Open Phones, you can manage business calls and texts from one app, whether you're at your desk or on the go. There's a shared inbox so your team can jump into any conversation without missing a beat. They've got an AI agent handling after-hours calls, answering common questions, capturing leads, so you never miss a customer. Open Phone is offering our listeners 20% off the first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedonnba. That's openphone.com/lockedonnba. And if you're switching from another service, Open Phone will even port your existing numbers at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers.
One last thing about Dan's article, Andy, that actually stuck out to both of us. Among the things that Luka did in this time period, I guess it was last week, or it seemed like that's what they were saying. He filmed an episode of Hot Ones, which, if you don't know what that show is, it's the one where Sean Evans sits with a star and interviews them while they eat a series of progressively hotter chicken wings. And I think most people are pretty familiar with this show by now, but
super popular.
It's very, very popular. But if you haven't seen it, it is legitimately one of the best interview shows out there.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's excellent. And I love watching it. I watch it relatively regularly. I don't necessarily think this is going to be like the best episode of Hot Ones ever, only because Luka's just not a super vibrant and interview or whatever. But I do think this could end up being one of the best interviews of Luka that we've ever seen, because Sean Evans is that good at his job. So I'm very excited to see that one come out. Meanwhile, in other news, Kevin Love, Brett Siegel of Clutch Points reported that, quote, word around the league surrounding Love is that he wants to end up in Los Angeles. There were some rumors that Love would want to go to New York, but there doesn't seem to be much interest brewing from the Knicks. At different times, Love went to UCLA. He's been kind of linked back to here. Does that make it any sense at all for the Lakers?
No.
Any?
No. No, I don't. When you look at the things that the Lakers really need across the roster, athleticism, getting younger if possible, better defense if possible, better two-way play if possible. Kevin Love brings none of that to the table. He is 37 years old. He, in his prime, was never the quickest, most mobile defender or most effective defender. He has not been a particularly prolific NBA player for a few years. Last year, he played like 11 minutes a game for Miami, and they were looking to win. Like, they were actually trying to win games and couldn't find minutes for Kevin Love. He hasn't been particularly good from behind the arc. Like, he hasn't been terrible, but he has not been like one of the best shooting big men in the league percentage-wise for
it's been a while. It's been a minute.
3 or 4 seasons. I don't really know what he brings to the table that you're not theoretically getting from Maxi Kleber, more or less. And I just don't feel like he still can rebound pretty well. And I know the Lakers.
He is a good rebounder.
They've lacked some rebounding, but for the most part, no, I don't think he particularly helps. And when you take into account that the Lakers, even though they have an open roster spot, they cannot even right now, because of cap issues, sign a veterans minimum guy. They don't have the space for it. Unless they happen to do a consolidation trade that has absolutely nothing to do with Kevin Love whatsoever.
Right.
But after doing the trade, they have more space, and then they've canvassed the league for anybody better, can't get anybody better, and then decide to bring in Kevin Love. Like, okay, fine. But otherwise, no, I think it makes very little sense at all.
It is worth noting Kevin Love is technically a member of the Utah Jazz right now. He's just not expected to be there for very long. At the very least, he's not expected to be there all season. Ray did point out his wife is gorgeous. Is that a good enough reason? I probably not from a basketball standpoint. He's married to a former SI swimsuit model. He looks very good in the Banana Republic.
Finally, we can see good-looking people at a Laker game. I mean, it's been a long time. It's been a long time coming before finally a pretty person showed up at crypto.com. So thankfully, I guess if they bring in Kevin Love, they can finally handle that problem that's plagued the Lakers for
It's
decades.
A parade of just unbelievably ugly people down in that lower bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
True. Okay, so maybe that's not going to do it either. I feel about, like, we were kind of talking about this earlier in the day, and it's like I agree with everything you're saying. Like, you don't open up space, you don't sacrifice a player, like you don't do any of that for Kevin Love. But like, if you just said like there was some rule where you could just grab a guy and like stick him on your bench, like everybody could get like a 16th guy, and like, he's just sort of there to serve as
only
like
15.
What?
Are there only 15 on the roster?
That's what I'm saying. You could just sort of grab a 16th guy. Like, sure, you can have that guy.
I think they call those assistant coaches, Brian.
That's, maybe that's the role. I wouldn't mind having him around. I just wouldn't do anything to get him. I like the idea of having
do what? Like, what are you around for?
To do the veteran guy stuff. Like, that's just, every team has one of these guys. And, the dude who basically wears the warm up all year. If you ever, you need him 7 times for 11 minutes, and you can stick him in there and it's fine.
The Lakers don't have a deep enough bench, to be totally honest, for that. Type of luxury.
I agree with you. That's why I wouldn't actually sacrifice anything. But like, it would just be one of those things that if they had the room, I don't object to it. I don't mind the idea of sticking Kevin Love at the end of the bench for this team. I just don't think you can make it. The Clippers maybe could. They need a little veteran presence.
They've got the same problem. They don't have the cap space either.
No, and it wouldn't make them much older. Like, Kevin Love actually would raise the average age for the Lakers. He really wouldn't raise the average age for the Clippers. And by the way, he's not 37 for another 30 days. So please don't age the guy any more than he already is. But it does. At some point, you do expect the Lakers to find a way to fill that 15th spot. it's just going to take a minute, I think, because again, they don't have the cap space to do it right now anyway, the apron space, to be more accurate. And to get to that place, you have to start moving players around, and they just, there's nowhere to move anybody right now.
I've also seen too, like on social media and whatnot, I think actually even a few comments in this show, like the idea of bringing Kevin Love as something that theoretically would make LeBron happy, just because they are very close friends. And I want to make it clear, to the best of my knowledge, there is no evidence that LeBron wants this, agitating for it, pressuring, anything like that. Just so it is clear, this thought process is not stemming from anything that is thus far being reported about LeBron, but that is the thought process. I just want to make that clear before people start crapping on LeBron over this. But that being said, even if, say, LeBron did want Kevin Love, I still don't think it's a good reason to do it, because it doesn't make them any better from a basketball perspective. And reportedly or theoretically, the reason LeBron would be still uncertain about his situation with the Lakers is because from a basketball perspective, he doesn't think they're good enough to compete for a championship. Kevin Love doesn't make them better. So I would look for somebody else that would make the team better. And if it is really, and again, to make it clear, no evidence of this, but if it really is just about LeBron wanting a teammate that he's close to, like, okay, no,
like, no. I mean, I think it's much more a guy who went to UCLA, was born in Santa Monica, got connections to California up and down.
Just saying, I mean, for me, the idea of closeness, LeBron, I mean, the Santa Monica UCLA thing, I mean, it's 20 years ago.
No, I'm just saying that, like, it's much more likely he just wants to be like, probably my last year, I'd rather spend it in California than Utah.
Well, I know why Kevin.
I am talking about what you were saying before, like about LeBron is not. None of this has anything to do with LeBron. It's just Kevin Love would rather be in California,
right,
playing with one of the LA teams, than he'd rather be in Salt Lake City. Again, I don't think anything you're saying is wrong. Like, the idea is to improve the team. The idea is to find the best players. There is a space on most good teams for that kind of seasoned guy who's a good presence in the locker room, good, all that kind of stuff. And I wouldn't mind him filling that role. I just don't think they have the luxury of trying to open up a space, whether it's the literal Kevin Love or a different version of that same role. They don't have the ability to open that up for anybody, whether it's Love or, a Morris or anybody else out there right now.
No, they need to get legitimately deeper as a roster, and Kevin Love just doesn't help, whether for basketball reasons, whether it would be as an accommodation to LeBron. It wouldn't make sense on either level. And no, unless a bunch of different machinations take place where the roster gets better, and then at that point you add Kevin Love, sure. But otherwise, no, I think it's a silly idea.
I did once see him box out a sumo wrestler, and that was pretty impressive. Locked on Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 36,000 subscribers to the channel. We will be back tomorrow. Luka, I believe, is playing on Friday against Germany with the national. I don't think that is. I think that's like a friendly, they call it, a warm-up game. But we'll sort of start paying attention to what Luka is doing with the Slovenian team, see how he looks. This will be his first 5-on-5 game since the end of the NBA season. So we'll see how that goes as we get towards Eurobasket. Everybody have a good day.